of Adventure. This is episode 209 with Jordan Harbinger. The Art of Adventure is the podcast that helps you travel the world, run your business, and embark on an epic quest. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide Derek Loudermilk. You can find the show notes for this episode and all the other episodes at derekloudermilk.com. This episode is brought to you by Adventure Quest. That is our own branch of adventure trips for entrepreneurs. The next one is coming up in Bali, April 20 to 27th. There's actually a couple spots left. So if you're not signed up, if you've never been to Bali, first of all, you really need to get here. It's a special, magical place. And this particular trip, we've got some really awesome activities planned for you. We've got canyoning, we've got surfing, we've got volcano climbing, and some business sessions to help unlock your next level in business. It's going to be a really awesome trip. We've got a great group of people signed up already. So if you haven't started a conversation with me about that, then you definitely should. So information about that is at derekloudermilk.com. Today's guest, Jordan Harbinger, he's back on the show after a few years. It's been a while since he's been on the show. And he is starting over in some ways. He's got a new show called the Jordan Harbinger Show. He is one of the best interviewers in the world today. He does really amazing long-form audio interviews with his guests. And he split with his former company, which was The Art of Charm. And so he no longer has access to that audience. And so very quickly, he wanted to rebuild his podcast, which is now the Jordan Harbinger Show, from the ground up, starting at episode 0. But he had built an amazing network over the last decade as a podcaster. So this is a great look. This episode, we take an inside look at how someone who has an amazing network and really good skill as an interviewer starts over from scratch. It's a fascinating topic. How do you use your connections? How do you use your network? And then we actually get into what are the skills that make him one of the best interviewers. What is the professional level of interviewing look like? How does he prepare? How does he run an interview? You're gonna really love this. Jordan, as always, is a really fun, witty guest, very insightful. So without further ado, here is Jordan Harbinger. Hi, Jordan. Welcome back to the Art of Adventure.
Oh, gosh, that was the end of the sentence? I already blew it. Thanks for having me back on, man. I appreciate it. Your tonation went up, and I was like, and there's nothing else.
Well, what I was going to say is that it's been 3 years or more since you were last on the show, so it's really cool to have you back on.
Yeah, likewise, man. It has been quite a while, and I remember, because your last name is kind of memorable, I remember thinking, oh, yeah, this guy, Derek Loudermilk, still after it. In fact, I met one other person with the same last name as you, and I was like, they must be related.
Okay, where did you meet them? Because it's a geographically centered name in the South.
I'm trying to think where. I don't know, actually. It was probably at a conference, so I don't know if we were in the place where she lives or grew up, but I just thought, what a strange coincidence, because there's probably 2 people in the world with that name that I know, and, that's it.
Yeah. How about that? Yeah. You go to lots of conferences. I'll just jump in right here. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're an amazing connector. That's one of the things we talked about on our last interview. What are you doing at conferences? Are you actively working on building new relationships, or are you just focused on giving the talks that you're there for? How do you approach events these days?
Yeah, so events are interesting because I just got back from social media marketing world, traffic conversion, things like that. I didn't go to any sessions other than the ones I was speaking at. And it's not because I'm too cool for these sessions or anything like that. It's just that I only go to these events other than to speak, which is kind of why I get paid or hired to go there in the first place. The only reason I go is for relationships. And it's not running around trying to meet new people. I do that occasionally. But really, I'm there to shore up existing relationships, hang out with people I never get to see in person otherwise. And I really utilize that as a way to connect and reconnect with people that I otherwise might not have in the room. So that's the only reason for me to actually go to these events, if that makes sense. It's not that the content's not good. It's just that the content I can get from books or by calling the people that are giving the talks or interviewing the people that are giving the talks if I really need the content, or hiring the people that are giving the talks to consult. It's not that the content's not useful. It's that the relationships are more useful.
Gotcha. And are you doing specific things like hosting events within events or meetups, or how do you strengthen those relationships?
Yeah, good question. Actually, so at most events, I will make sure that first of all, before I go to any event, I find out who else is going. So I look at the speaker list. Then I will contact people I know on that speaker list and say, hey, why are you going to this event? And sometimes they'll say, I'm not. Why? How did you? And I go, oh, you're on the speaker list. So that's a good way to sort of debunk a crap event. But if it's an event I already know about that's going to be good, I'll call the speakers that I know that are going, and I'll say, who are you going to meet? Why are you going? Are there any events that you should sign up for? And often one or two people will just go, oh, yeah, there's this party that my friend's having, or, oh, there's a dinner that I always go to. Let me see if I can get you an invite. So I'll go that route. And then also at the event, if there's not a bunch of other sort of side events going on already and other things, appointments and things that I have to connect with people, I will do something where I will often arrange something like mini golf. And I'll say, hey, these 6 people, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, let's go play some mini golf. And it's great because it's off-site, it's cheap, it's outside, and it's fun. Everyone's bad at it. And even if someone's really good at it, no one cares. You're talking most of the time because there's a lot of downtime waiting for other people to go. And it's safe. It doesn't require you to sweat. There's a million reasons for it. But also it just gets people in a group to do something that's sort of nostalgic. And that's really good for connecting. Other people will go, oh, I'm going to do a dinner. But then it's like, oh, well, in order to do a dinner, you're competing with other people who are doing dinners. A lot of people won't show up. It's expensive. Wait, do you pay? Do the people pay? Is the food good there? How do we get everyone there? Does the restaurant have enough room? What if someone's late? Do we get seated? There's too many logistical issues. And then even if all that works out, cool. So I'm sitting next to Derek. I'm sitting next to John. Do I get to talk to other people because they're kind of at the other end of this loud table and we're not really moving around? So I just had dinner with the 2 people that were there, even though there were 16 people at the dinner, and then the host pays $5,000 for the dinner and talked with 4 people. It's not that good for this. And dinners are overrated.
And you have, with mini golf, the power of a shared activity, like Band of Brothers, like we're all out here toiling against the wicked holes together, kind of the wicked windmills or something.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, nobody goes to a dinner and goes, man, that was something else. Unless something else happened at the dinner, right? Or it's at a really special place that's probably super expensive. But when you go play mini golf, it's like, that was really fun. I haven't done that for like 20 years. Yeah. Oh man, Nicole kept shooting her balls in the water thing, and then we had to go in there, and we almost got kicked out, and the little kid almost hit me in the junk with his golf club, and you're laughing, and then you go get a bite, and then you go get a drink, and it turns into a thing. Whereas the dinner, the food's done, it's like, cool. If I leave now, I can still hit that happy hour that's being run by that other company. See you guys later. And then it's like, oh, well, she left. I guess this is over, so I'm leaving too. Yeah. And then it dissipates because you're probably close to the hotel. If you're doing mini golf, it's like no one's going, well, we're on hole 9 and we're on hole 8 and there's 9 holes, but I'm just going to bounce. No. What are you talking about? The game's not over. What are you talking about? What are you doing? Nobody does that. And then you also, at the end of it, it's like, oh, that was really fun. And if somebody needs to run after that, they can, but generally the rest of the group is going to stick together. And yeah, you have a shared experience.
This is great. I always get these interesting tidbits from guests. Like also Travis Sherry, who runs a travel podcast, he gives chocolate to the flight attendants, and so I'm like, okay, I'm stealing the chocolate, I'm stealing mini golf. Like it's just going to be a collection of fun little things that work really well.
Yeah, that's a really brilliant idea. I know a buddy of mine, he brings an AeroPress, which makes really good coffee on airplanes, and he'll be like, do you guys want coffee? They're like, oh, we have coffee. And he's like, no. Do you want good coffee? And he'll bust out like good beans in his little grinder and then his AeroPress, and they're like, oh my God, you are awesome. And then he drinks for free on the rest of the flight. But yeah, you could buy a bag of fun-sized Snickers and go to the back galley and say, hey, somebody needs a little pick-me-up, do they not? And they're like, oh, yes, awesome, thank you. Or, people love that. And it can be the difference between, sorry, sir, we're all out of vegetarian dinners, and here's your food, and here's a margarita because the kid next to you keeps screaming.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of stuff like that, little hacks like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about cashing in on relationship and social capital. So you have a new podcast, Jordan Harbinger Show. It's 12 episodes right now, I believe, out as of this recording. And formerly you were the host of The Art of Charm. So perhaps you could, this is a two-part question, say why you're starting the Jordan Harbinger Show, why you're starting over effectively, and then how you're using all of the social capital you've built over the years to help launch your new show.
Yeah, so the reason I left The Art of Charm was because, one, I should have left years ago, but I ended up having a split with my business partners, and there was supposed to it was supposed to go down a little bit smoother than it did, for sure. And there's still some of that that's ongoing, so there's some of that stuff that I shouldn't talk about, but it is a huge opportunity. Nobody wants to start over. And I was freaking out about it for a while, but this is one of the best opportunities that I've had, because not only do I have a chance to start with a clean brand, because the Art of Charm is a goofy sounding name that really scared off a lot of high quality guests and scared off a lot of high quality educated listeners as well. Jordan Harbinger Show doesn't have that problem. And my whole team left with me. So every single person that I worked with at all at the company came along for the ride. So I've got everybody around me that I needed, that I ever worked with, that is doing good work, and they're all excited. And so this is actually kind of, everyone was like, wow, we got removed. And it's like, yeah, but it's kind of like it's kind of like we lucked out, right? It was like, oh, wait a minute. We split into two companies, except for 100% of the talent came along for the ride with me and most of the team. And so it actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise. So what's really useful about this is that when you leave and you don't get your email list, your website, your social media, your podcast feed, or whatever, that originally was super intimidating. But what I realized is the skills that I've built over the last decade and change, those are all coming with me. The team all came with, like I said, and I've got the relationships. I have all the relationships. All I've done for the past 11 years is focus on these relationships, because that's what we were teaching at this stinking company in the first place. And so when I reached out to people for help, a lot of folks said, oh man, you're going to find out who your friends are. And what I've found is that not only do I have many more friends than I ever thought, but those same friends and acquaintances are willing to bend over backwards to help out. And so this type of stretch, this type of launch of this new show, the Jordan Harbinger Show, has just been unprecedented. I mean, the amount of downloads that, for example, my Simon Sinek episode has, episode number 6, it's been out for just a couple of weeks. The amount of downloads this episode has is the same amount of downloads that I had after a decade of building up the other show, The Art of Charm. Wow. I have the same number of episodes on this episode that's 2 weeks old that I would have had after 6 weeks and 10 years of building the other show. So as you can see, the audience has largely migrated along with us, but also the fact is we're just able to do really high quality content now and have no holds barred in terms of people don't have that, should I click on this? This brand is weird. That stigma is gone. And so the relationships that I have, for just case in point, Kevin Rose just tweeted out my show a few minutes ago.
Nice.
Like that's something that would have taken me years and years and years and years and years to build and make happen. And the good news is it stays with. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter that I've changed brands or changed companies, it stays with us. And he sent it out to his audience of recommendations as well. So that type of thing is just massive. You can't purchase that. I suppose you could if you had enough money, but you really, when I look at the assets of the business as it existed before I left, and I look at the assets of the business now, the relationships are what counts for the most. The relationships, the team, and the skills that the team has as a whole are far more valuable than a highly trafficked website or a social media account that has 300 robot followers on Twitter. It's just not even it's not even comparable. You know, the opportunities that I'm sort of walking or stumbling into or being invited into now, they're the same opportunities that I would have been granted under any umbrella. It's that they follow you as the person. They don't come with the company. And so that's just been huge. You know, the sponsors came to the new show. The vendors came to the new show. The team came to the new show. I didn't have to solicit them. They came with me of their own volition. And that has been something that I never would have thought about. That has been more of a vote of confidence than any sort of self-confidence I could have generated on my own. And the fact is that vote of confidence means the world to me, because it's allowed me to rebuild a business in what looks to be a few months that took me over a decade to build before.
Wow. And why are you building the same, it seems like the same business, different brand? Why still do podcasting? Is it still the best channel for the interview style that you do? And is that before you had the training with the Art of Charm, is that going to be part of the business model this time around?
Yeah, so it's not the same business at all. I never really, the last half decade, I couldn't have cared less what was going on with certain parts of the business, the old business. It wasn't interesting to me. I don't care about meeting girls at bars. I'm married now. That stuff just doesn't interest me. And so I'm going to be doing events. I'm going to have online products, but I could not care less about some of the things that were being taught and the way that those things were being taught. And I got to be a little careful here, but I just was not interested in that. And that was a big point of cognitive dissonance and contention for me, because I kind of had to shill those things in order to keep the business afloat as the source of lead gen for the company. And yet I just didn't care. And it wasn't the product quality was low or anything like that. It was just, I just totally didn't care. It didn't fit my personal brand either. And so in a way, I've always been doing the Jordan Harbinger Show. It's just that now I actually get to name it that, and nobody has a temper tantrum. Whereas before, when I wanted to do some sort of off-topic interview, there was always like, well, this person, you know, you need to focus more on the dating and this stuff. And I just thought, I'm going to just kill me now. I don't want to do any more of this. And so having the opportunity to split the brand, even though it didn't happen in the way that I wanted, has been awesome. Because now I can interview the enemy of Vladimir Putin, who's responsible for Russian sanctions. Now I can interview the person who is creating something really amazing that has nothing to do with social dynamics or being a cool guy or whatever. Now I can interview a celebrity like Shaquille O'Neal or Russell Brand, and I don't have to go, well, this is totally different than what we normally do here, because this is what we are going to be doing on the show. I'm going to be taking brilliant people, studying their thoughts, their actions, their mental models, their habits, and asking them the questions so that we can deliver their superpowers to the Jordan Harbinger Show audience. And it doesn't have to be something about social value or meeting your significant other. It's not about the guest. It's about what the guest can teach the listener. And that's what we can focus on, because now I'm not trying to sell some totally disconnected product or service inside the show under the umbrella of, oh yeah, but also this show's about this. It's about whatever I want it to be now, and that's very freeing.
And do you have what compels you to want to do these interviews? What drives you to want to rebuild so quickly and get these interviews out there?
Well, doing the interviews over the past 11 to 12 years, what I've noticed and what I've learned is I've become obsessed with the craft of interviewing. And so when I look at other interviewers that are really good, I realize, oh, you know what? There's not that many. There just aren't. And those that are often being forced to work with short form formats. So they're doing 15, 20-minute segments. I like long format interviews with great people, and there's just frankly not that many people doing this anymore. The people that are doing this that are really good, like Charlie Rose and stuff like that, they're going to retire at some point. You know, these stories that we see, these things are not going to be around forever. And now the new generation of listener, the educated, affluent, smart person, there's just not that many resources for them right now. There's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of political stuff and talk. There's a lot of interesting books and things like that, but there's just not that many interviewers that are taking these great people and spending their time wisely and getting their thoughts out there. So not only do I love it, but it's important work. It's going to outlast me. And there's just not that many other people doing a decent job at it. There's a million people interviewing top entrepreneurs and finding out what their favorite book is or whatever. I don't do that. I'm trying to get mental models, and that in itself is an art form to elicit, because the people who are using them don't really know what they are, and they don't know they're using them in the first place. So that's why I spend 10 to 12 hours or 8 to 12 hours fairly preparing each interview, because it's important, and you can't do a mediocre job and have the same result. You can't put in half the amount of work and have half the result. You have to put in all of the work to get the result. It's a binary thing. You either have a good interview or you have a crappy one. Where you left something on the table. Even if people think your interview is good, if you're leaving the knowledge on the table, it's a wasted opportunity.
So I was trying to think what makes Jordan such a good interviewer, and there's this element that I feel like you've got from the Art of Charm, which is this sort of banter and ability to make guests feel at ease, and then your ability to illuminate the mental models. But how do you approach illuminating mental models from a guest?
Sure. So the first thing that comes out of it is the prep that I mentioned before. So I'll spend enough time preparing, reading the entire book from the guest, listening to 2 or 3 hours of them being interviewed by other high-quality interviewers, if those exist, looking at controversy about them online, looking at criticism of their work. So like a negative Amazon review that's been upvoted as most helpful, another scientist or something, if I'm interviewing like a researcher that disagrees with them. Those are all important resources for me. And sometimes in the case of a celebrity or something like that, I'll try to find somebody that knows them personally, and I'll bring out a personal anecdote, and that will be really useful. So, for example, when I interviewed Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs a long time ago, one of the things I did was I found his old college roommate. And that wasn't deliberate. I wasn't like, I need to find his college roommate. But that person just sort of popped out. And I went, oh, my God, I have questions. And he was like, oh, I don't know. He's a celebrity. I don't want to talk smack. And I'm like, no. Tell me what you like about him. And he's like, oh, well, that's easy. Right? Nobody's going to get mad if I tell him something, the reason I love this guy.
Yeah.
So I got all these great stories about him being a good person. And I brought those up before the interview and during the interview. And he was just thrilled. Because he's like, wow, I haven't thought about that guy in forever. Oh, man, this one time we did this and we did that. And immediately I knew I was going to get good stuff. Because it wasn't the content of the stories that came out. It was, oh, we have mutual friends. He knows these things about me. I'm in a good mood now. I'm nostalgic. That made for a totally different interview than, so tell me how you got to where you are today. So, what's it like being famous? So, how would I get to where you... I mean, these are all things that are going to make him want to stab his eyes out and regret saying yes. So, I avoid those things. I also look at questions that if they've answered a billion other similar questions in all their other interviews, I won't ask those. I'll just come in with the assumption. And I'll say something like, I've heard you say that, blah, 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 blah. But my question is, and then I'll expand on it. I won't go, so, tell me how you got your start in TV. Even though I already know the answer. Oh, okay. So how would you expand on that? Because then they're just going, the same old tired soundbite. So I get the good stuff. The other by getting the basics out of the way, by preparing and taking copious notes. And then I arrange my show notes after doing the prep. The day before, I'll go through the show notes and I'll write questions that I have based on my notes and based on the questions that I wrote while taking the notes. Then I'll highlight in different colors. Here's a story. Ask him for a story about this. Ask him for a practical exercise about that. Because the Jordan Harbinger Show, every single episode has worksheets. And since every episode has worksheets, that means that there's got to be something to do that's practical from each of the guests So I have to make sure I elicit that. So all the practicals, drills, exercises are highlighted in one color. The stories are highlighted in another color. And other things that I have questions about are highlighted in different colors. And then once I go through that particular piece of content, I highlight it in another color so that I can follow along with my line of questioning. So I'm using those notes just really a lot during the interview, but I don't have my questions written verbatim or anything. I just have this weird sort of shorthand in the notes, and that's how I use to elicit the models. And when I'm looking for mental models, I'm thinking, all right, so when I interviewed this guy, Bill Browder, who is Putin's enemy, and he's got all these oligarchs trying to kill him, and Vladimir Putin's trying to kill him, I see a certain through line in the stories that he's telling in his book. And that through line, one of many, was, wow, this guy's just he's just courageous. He's 33, people are trying to kill him, but he's like, screw it, I'm going to stay in the country. And then, he's got this other person, and he's in jail, his lawyer's in jail, and he's like, I'm going to go visit him. What? Wouldn't you be scared? They're throwing this guy. Well, I uncovered a massive tax fraud, and it's run by the army. Maybe you should go back to London. Nope, I'm going to investigate this. So I'm like, this guy is ballsy. So my question is he ballsy or is he dumb? Right? Well, he's not dumb. He's got $1 billion fund. So where is this confidence coming from? Where did he learn that? How is he functioning? How is he evaluating threats? These are the questions that naturally arise when you're paying attention to what somebody is saying, in what they're saying in their stories, what they're saying in their books, and what other people say about them. And if you can find people that know them and ask them questions, when you book an interview, you're often talking with the person's assistant. They work with that person all day, every day. Why don't you have any questions for them? That person works with that person every single day. I might say, oh, Denise, while I've got you here doing the microphone test with my producer, I'm curious, if you had to describe Bill in 5 words, what would it be? Or if you had to name your top quality that you admire about him, what would it be? Those people know him really well. There's a reason we call people that we work with really closely our work wife or our work husband, right? They're like family. They come to your Christmas party. You have holiday parties for those people in your staff. They know you well. Some people have had assistants for 10 or 20 years. Even if they just had that person there for a few months, they know them better than you're going to know them in an hour. So ask them questions. A lot of times they won't say anything, but if you ask them, what's the best thing about working there? What's the number one thing you like about this person? Who's not going to answer that?
Yeah, this seems like just such a detective process to
totally
really sort of just understand who they are as a person, and then to go deeper than other interviewers might. Absolutely.
The other thing is, I have all these questions, but I'm not locked into the script. If I don't get the answer to that, it's okay. Anything in the script that I don't get, in script and notes, I'm totally fine with it. You can't be attached to the next question. I hear a lot of interviewers do this, and you'll hear something like, so mystery guest, who I won't name because it's not a real person. So I heard that you grew up in a rough area of town, and you started selling drugs. How did you get out of that? And they'll say, yeah, what happened was my friend got shot, and I decided, wow, I'm not invincible anymore. I spent all this time with that guy. And then I was homeless, so I started sleeping in this church. And then one day the pastor found me, and he was like, hey, why don't you come into the church and learn what we're doing here and at least get a hot meal? So I went in the church, and I realized, wow, maybe there's a place for me here because blah, 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 blah. And then the interviewer goes, oh, okay. And then when did you start your app business? Because and it's like, what the hell are you doing? You just found out this person's friend got shot. They were a drug dealer. They were homeless. They slept in a church, and then they got into their religion. And you're like, so tell me about your app. Fire yourself. There are so many more interesting threads there, but they aren't thinking about that because their app is the next line on their set of questions and prep. And they're afraid that if they go off that, they're going to look like they don't know what they're doing. And instead, they don't look like they know what they're doing because they're stuck to their notes. So you have to prepare like crazy and then almost ignore every question that you wrote down and just trust your interviewer instincts. And if you don't have interviewer instincts yet, you can be glued to your notes, but do not be married to the show flow. And I think a lot of people will do that. And we do that in conversations too. When we're trying to get something from someone, we'll be like, hey, Derek, what's going on? And you're like, oh, nothing. I just published this new book. It's called Superconductors. It's going to be really great. Cool, man. Anyway, so more about me, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, I guess we're not talking about my work anymore. And you know how that feels. It sucks. And not only are you making the other person feel bad, you've just totally blew off an opportunity to hear what's going on in that person's life because I came in with an agenda. So as an interviewer and as a friend and as a human, when we're interacting with others, ditch the agenda. Because the best, and you know this from traveling, man, you go and you're like, we're going to go to this museum. And then the museum's closed, but there's this guy outside and he starts talking with you and he's like, oh, you wanted to see what's in the museum? Well, I run the warehouse and all the things that are in the museum, they come from the warehouse. I could take you to the warehouse. You'd be like, yeah, let's go to the warehouse and see some Egyptian stuff that's not in the museum. You don't go, nah, I really wanted to see this museum. I guess I'll just come back tomorrow, right? You don't do that when you're traveling. You go for the adventure, man. And that's what we're doing when we're interviewing people on the Jordan Harbinger Show. And that's what we should be doing in all of our conversations, is coming at it like a travel thing, like a travel story. And I don't want to talk over you here, but I'll tell you this. When I was traveling a long time ago, I went to Kosovo. And my friend and I were supposed to catch a bus at 6:00. And we hired this cabbie, and he spoke Albanian and German. And I speak German, so I sat in the front seat. And we asked this cabbie to take us around, and he showed us a bunch of cool stuff. And then his German wasn't that good, but my friend and I were like, okay, we got to go to the bus station soon, but we want some Kosovo Liberation Army, which is like this guerrilla force that was fighting the Serbs during their war there. Yeah. We want some T-shirts that from these guys. And he goes, T-shirt, okay. So he drives us to a store where they sell Kosovo Liberation Army stuff, and they only had these like giant T-shirts that were all faded from sun. I guess that's not a big selling item. And we're like, these kind of suck. So we said, oh, nah, is there another place where we can buy stuff? Where we can get Kosovo Liberation Army stuff? And I don't know if he didn't understand us or what, but he took us to their training camp.
Whoa.
And we're like, wait a minute. So we show up and this ranking officer comes out and he's like, who are you? And we're like, we're students. And he's like, journalists? And we're like, no, students. And he goes, show me your passport. And we're like, crap, everybody's armed. Where are we? We're a little nervous. We show him our passport. He walks off with our passports. I'm thinking, oh my God, we're so in trouble. We don't have mobile phones. This is before mobile phones were ubiquitous. This is like 2002 or something. So he comes back with the passports and he goes, all right, come on in. And I guess he was just making copies of the passports. So he hands us our passport, showing them to somebody else who approved us. So he goes, all right, come on in. And I look at my friend and I go, we're going to miss the bus. And he goes, I don't care. Do you care? And I go, no, not at all. Because either we're going to miss the bus because we're locked up in this camp, or we're going to miss the bus because we're at a freaking KLA training camp with our cabbie who's translating all this into German and all these KLA guys and girls who are armed and hanging out. So they show us all these photographs of their friends and they're telling us who died. And it's kind of like this moving thing. And they show us where they train and they're showing us all this crazy stuff from their camp. And then they go, do you guys want to go shoot guns? And I said, yeah, we want to shoot guns. And he goes, cool. We just ask that you pay for the ammunition because it's kind of expensive. And the other guy's like, no, don't worry about it. They're guests. So we go to their shooting range, load up AK-47s, and just wreck some targets. And I'm thinking, definitely better than the bus ride and definitely better than a T-shirt.
Wow. And it's just this, it's like the principle of improv where you just say yes and. You're like, okay, this cabbie's taking us here. Let's, we're just going to roll with it.
Totally.
Wow. That is probably the most epic interview analogy that I've your examples analogies are really impressive, including the one I think that you made up about the guy in the church drug dealer.
Yeah, that was based on somebody, but I can't remember who the hell it was. And I'm probably blending 2 or 3 guests, but I definitely know there was a guy, I think it was actually Eric Thomas who I interviewed, Pastor Eric Thomas, who was homeless for a while, then got into religion. I don't know if he was a drug dealer, though, so I didn't want to be like, oh, yeah, I was a drug dealer. Then he's like, he sends me a message like, dude, I was not a drug dealer. So I know I blend guests together, but I know also that I think Pastor, the hip-hop preacher Eric Thomas, was homeless for a minute and found refuge in a church, and that's kind of what got him into it. But you got to be careful when you're recounting an interview, because if you get it wrong, it's just really bad. Especially if you're saying, oh, this person used to be a criminal. And you're like, no, I was never a criminal. Whoops.
Sorry. Okay, so this is something that, I've done a couple hundred interviews now, but the segue, the sort of, wow, that's really interesting. I want to say something more than, wow, that's really interesting. So how do I, as an interviewer, do something more interesting in a response to their epic story?
Yeah, so this has been a problem for me in the past where my producer, Jason DeFilippo, who's on me with every episode, he bans me from using certain words. Absolutely is one of them because it's just super overused by me. And interesting is also more or less banned unless I really mean it and you can tell. So I have to come up with something else. And what I've realized over years of doing interviews is, and just having conversations with people is interesting, nod head. It's not a good response because you probably don't mean it. You're just trying to fill awkward silence. So I'll just think of another question that I have on my mind. I'll go to another topic because it may make for an awkward transition for a second or a non sequitur, but it really doesn't matter. The audience doesn't care. And if you're in a real life conversation, since most of your people listening are not interviewers, if you're in a regular conversation, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to care if we're sitting in a circle and you say, wow, that was a really crazy story about the KLA. And I say, yeah, are you guys hungry? You're not going to go, oh, Jordan, that was a weird segue between that story and are we hungry? Come on, you can do better than that. But if you just say, interesting, and I say, and then you go, so on the topic of adventures, you don't have to do that. You just don't have to do it in real conversations. You don't have to do it in interviews. It doesn't matter. People feel like they have to have this continuous sort of like through line in all of their conversations, and you just don't. You just don't. Nobody cares. And if you're leading the conversation because you're asking questions or people are talking with you and you're answering them, nobody's going to think that it's weird. It just sounds weird when you have your scripted questions, you go off on a tangent and then you try to bring it back. You'll say something like, I just want to bring it back to the da-da-da-da. Who cares? Why are you announcing that you're bringing it back? Just bring it back. Just talk about whatever you want to talk about. Nobody really cares that you had a departure from the subject matter. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to figure out how to get back there. You don't have to navigate it. That stuff only happens in your head. And I know this from being an awkward teenager and having awkward conversations and overthinking everything and being in my head. That same thing happens to interviewers and it happens in regular conversations as well. You're not sitting there talking with your wife or girlfriend and she goes, what do you want for dinner? And you're like, man, I don't know. It's pretty cold outside, so I want hot food. So that rules out sushi. And then she goes, oh, should we go look at pets tonight because you're going to adopt a dog? You don't think, oh, come on. How did you get from dinner to let's go look at pets? We need a through line here. It just doesn't happen. It's just not a realistic thing that happens in conversations. But when we have manufactured conversations like interviews, somehow all these rules get put on them. And it's like, well, where did these come from? You made them up. Change them.
Yeah. So, okay, it's cool because you obviously continuing to evolve as an interviewer. And I think the first time you were on the show, we were talking about at times you had prepared a lot, and then at times you were like, maybe I can just wing it, and then you went back to preparing. And it's a skill that seems to have sort of infinite progression. But one of the things that's sticking in my mind was you're talking about the courage of the enemy of Putin. Are there times in an interview where you have to be courageous to ask certain questions of your guest?
Yeah, because here's how I got rid of this. Well, actually, the answer is yes, and also it's not that necessary. So, if I'm asking somebody something personal, then yeah, maybe it might come across as a little insulting, so I might buffer it with, some people say that your line of supplements are snake oil and that the science that you quote is not real. What would you say to those people? That way you can kind of redirect it. But usually I don't try to do that anymore. I used to do that. It's kind of a journalism trick. But I realized I'm an advocate for the audience. My whole idea with the Jordan Harbinger Show is every episode solves a problem. Every episode teaches somebody how to change something or fixes something. That's why every episode has worksheets, like I mentioned before, so that there's practicals. I'm not trying to be friends with the guest. I'm also not trying to offend the guest, but if I have to make a choice between, oh man, I have to ask them this difficult question and the audience really wants to know, but they might not like me after that, I don't care. The audience is going to be there next week if I don't screw it up. That guest is not. So I'm not really worried if I say to some random person, you know, a lot of people, they think that the way you've earned your money is fraudulent and that you're essentially running a complex scam. And looking at it from my preparation, I can see an argument where I understand why you're doing what you're doing, but I also understand the people that say that they feel ripped off. You know, how would you respond to that? And they might go, so you think I'm ripping people off when I sell them maps of a flat earth? And I might go, yeah. I mean, there's very little science that shows that this is accurate. Why are you doing this? You're a smart person. You could make money in another way. So it can't be that. And then they're like, well, I don't care if they get mad. They're not going to walk out. You know what? And if they do, whatever, man. I don't think I've ever had anybody stop an interview in the middle. Mm-hmm. And at the end, usually they'll say, man, you gave me a kind of a hard time there. And I'll say, yeah, I hope that was okay. And every single time they've gone, yeah, you know what? It is, because I'm going to have to face that sort of criticism at some point. So I understand it. I get it. And even if they don't like me after that, they're still going to respect it. They're still going to respect that show, that interview. And they might respect me as an interviewer, even if they don't invite me to Thanksgiving dinner. But I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to teach the audience and make the audience better for having listened. Every minute of attention that you get from somebody, whether it's a podcast or in real life, you have to earn that minute. And especially if I'm not in front of you, if I'm interviewing and you're listening to a file you downloaded for free, with their 350,000 podcasts, why are you listening to the Jordan Harbinger Show? Because I'm earning your attention. That's why. If I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. So I have to work harder than the next interviewer. I have to be better than them. And I have to earn your attention. Because you might listen to 12 episodes. And if episode number 13 isn't that good, you might forgive me because the other 12 were. But if you listen to episode number 14 and it also wasn't that good, I'm slipping in your mind. And you might tune out. Or you might go, maybe I should just listen to the people whose names I recognize. And then that's the beginning of how I lose you as a fan. And that's not worth it to me. That's why I don't interview people that I'm not interested in. And that's why I don't ask softball questions that I don't care about, because that's going to come through. And I'll do that in a regular conversation as well. I'm not going to sit there and talk with somebody and say, man, it's nice outside. Oh, this coffee's so good. I'm going to say something like, hey, so how did you get into this business? And how do you stand dealing with some of the other people in your industry? Because I don't like most of them and they're terrible. And they'll go, oh, God, I'm so glad you said something. It's a real conversation. If you're not having a real conversation, you're just wasting everybody's time, including your own. Yeah.
I was trying to think like a journalist in preparing to talk to you today. And I thought, maybe I'll just ask, if say you were interviewing yourself, like what hard question would you ask yourself that no one's asked you yet?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. That's a really unique question too. Good for you. I'm not sure what I would ask myself that I haven't been asked yet, aside from that question right there. But that's very meta. So let's think about this. This is really good. I might have to write this down too. That's a really good question. So I think a lot of people focus on things they can see right in front of them from a business perspective. So like, oh, you built your show and it's really big, And not a lot of people ask questions like, what other profession would you have done if not this one? Or what other profession would you like to do if not this one? Because I think something like that says a lot about the person. If somebody runs a hedge fund and you say, what other profession would you like to do if you knew you couldn't fail, or if you weren't in this one? And they say, ballroom dancer. You're like, wait, what? Ballroom dancing? Because you thought they were going to say lawyer or something like that. No, what? Ballroom dancing? That is bananas. So you learn a lot about the person from that. Now, that might not be a good thread because I might not give a crap about, oh, you like dancing. Let's go down that road. That might be great for a celebrity profile. Like if I talked to Shaq, who I interviewed a couple of years ago, and he said, oh, I want to be a ballroom dancer. He didn't say that. But imagine if he did. People would go bananas over that. Yeah. They would go crazy over that. But if somebody says, what kind of profession would you attempt? And, if you weren't doing this one, and they say something really interesting that isn't just crazy, they say, oh, well, actually, I've always wanted to write fictional novels about sailors. You're like, what? And then you go down, you have a whole thread that you can go down with folks like that that is super interesting. And I think nobody has the job they wanted when they were a kid. Really, almost nobody. So you can find out a lot about what they thought was interesting growing up, and what they thought that job was going to be like is going to showcase a set of personality traits.
And is that, you brought that up, so I'm wondering, is there a different career if, say, you had a non-compete clause and you weren't allowed to do interviews for 2 years after leaving Art of Charm? What would you do?
Hitting pretty close to home right there, man. That was one of the things I was worried about when I was leaving. I was like, oh my God, a non-compete, that would be so bad. But I don't have to worry about that at this point, thankfully. The job that I wanted when I was a kid, I always wanted to be Dan Rather. You know who that is, right?
He's a TV personality. Is he a weatherman or just a news?
No, he's a reporter, news anchor.
Okay.
He's like one of the most celebrated, and I remember looking at him, looking at footage that was old when I was a kid where he was in Vietnam and stuff. And I was like, I want to do that. And my mom was like, no, you don't want to do that. It's dangerous. And I was like, I really want to do that now. And she's like, no. And so she kept trying to talk me out of it. And you know how she did it? Finally, she goes, those people don't make any money. They're all poor. And I went, oh, no. She's like, yeah, you won't be able to feed your family. Now I'm like, wait a minute. Dan Rather's loaded. You lied to me. And she was like, I don't want you to go to war zones. Are you insane? So she talked me out of that. And I remember thinking, oh, that sucks. But when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be like a talk show host on the radio. But I became a lawyer. Remember, I didn't follow my passion to get here. This was an accident. I became an attorney first because I thought that would be a good career move. So, yeah, if I had some sort of non-compete, I would be speaking on stage and I would be writing about these sorts of similar topics and running events and creating online products because I love teaching and talking about this stuff. If I couldn't interview people for a podcast, though, yeah, that would be a huge bummer. I really love doing what I'm doing now.
And it's so cool that you intended to do that, and then after getting sidetracked with law, like here you are doing the thing that you were hoping to do anyway, pretty much.
Yeah, I wish I'd just done it earlier. Like I wish that but here's the thing, I tried radio when I was younger, and I went, all they want to hear about, and this is the beauty of new media, all they want to hear about is they want stupid, funny little 10-minute segments. They want prank calls. And I went, this isn't what I thought it was. These guys are dumb. I wasn't listening to NPR as a kid. I was listening to Drew and Mike out of Detroit. And I remember thinking, these guys are kind of funny, but I don't want to fart into a microphone, which was literally what these guys were doing for a while. And I was like, this is just dumb.
There's a fart button on the soundboard, right? It's like... You can just... I mean,
they just had stupid things like that. Or they'd prank call someone, and I remember thinking, this is just a waste of human potential. And at best, they're entertaining people on their morning drive, and I just thought, I kind of want a bigger mission than this. I wasn't thinking in those terms when I was younger, but I remember thinking, I'm not spending my life doing this.
Yeah.
That's just stupid. So that, for me, was I can't do this. And then, when podcasting was... starting to come out and I started having conversations, I wasn't thinking I want to do podcasting. I was just having conversations with people, and there was no way to upload them, so I was burning CDs and carrying them in my pocket. That was how I got into this. Yeah. I was burning CDs from conversations that I was having in real life and keeping them in my pocket and handing them out to my friends. They were lessons about body language and influence, persuasion, and networking. Podcasting didn't exist, and then somebody goes, you should put these online. And I said, I have no idea how to do that. And my friend at the time goes, there's this new thing called podcasting, and I think you can upload an MP3 and people can download it through iTunes. And I went, I've got to set that up. We got to do that.
Wow.
So we installed WordPress and we were hosting these MP3s on GoDaddy. And we found out the show was popular because our hosting bill was ridiculous. And I went, I can't afford to pay this. And they went, well, we're going to shut down your account. And I went, okay. And that's what I found Libsyn. And I was like, hey, I can't afford my host. And he went, ours is $12 or $5 a month. You can afford that. And I went, cool. And that's how we ended up there. Because I had a GoDaddy bill that was like, I don't know, $600, which for a college student was like 6 times what I made in a month spending money. And I just went, what? And I went, this is wrong. It said someone from South Africa downloaded this. That can't be true. Everyone's from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And they went, no, this is like a global thing. You have to pay for each file. And I went, there's no way 8,000 people downloaded this. It's impossible. And it wasn't impossible. It was the beginning of this. It was the beginning of this.
Wow. That's so cool. And it's really interesting that there's that word interesting, and now it's in my awareness.
Well, but you meant it, right? You meant it at the time. It's only bad to say that if it's a reflex so that you buy time. It's only bad to use filler words like that, because if you're in a regular conversation, like most of your listeners are going to be, because they're not interviewers or broadcasters, it's only bad if they go, I don't know what to say right now, so I'm just going to say, oh, cool. That's cool is a very common one. Oh, interesting is another one that people don't mean. It's only bad if you don't mean it. It's just better to go, and then pause and just deal with the awkward silence. That's better than a filler word that you don't mean. So just deal with it that way is my advice. But
Gotcha.
In your case, the way you just used interesting, it sounded like you meant it. So either you have me fooled or it's an okay time to say.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to me because it was a similar situation where I was doing interviews and then transcribing them myself and putting them in a blog because I didn't know that I could just upload the audio and people could just listen to the actual interview.
There you go.
So I guess we've got time for about one more question. So is there something that you believe is true or that you feel strongly about that most other people disagree with you on?
The old lightning round. Yeah, I don't believe people should follow their passion. I think that's crappy advice. It's given by people who don't know what else to say during commencement speeches and the like, and they say it because it sounds good and it gets applause, but it's some of the worst advice you could possibly give.
Yes, I agree. And it reminds me of Cal Newport, that passion develops over time rather than something
that's right. That's right. That's probably where I got that from. Cal's a good friend of mine. I love his work. His books, Deep Work, So Good They Can't Ignore You. That is probably where I developed that. Because in my mind, that's an original thought. But you're right. I totally probably yoinked that from his work. Because that's what happens when you read a bunch of books. You think you're really smart, but really you're just really good at getting other people's ideas in a blender in your brain. And then you're going, ooh, I just invented this. And it's like, nah, bro, you read that from other people that are really
chances
smart.
Are that you probably are inventing at least variations and intersections based on all these ideas. So you probably are having lots of original thoughts that are compounds of other original thoughts.
Yeah, of course. It's what James Altucher would call idea sex, where it's just in your brain. And it's like, oh, that came out of as a result of this and this and this and this. And it's like, well, maybe. Or maybe it seems original and your brain came up with it as a result of all these other inputs. So, yeah, I'm a little self-deprecating there, but I like to give credit where credit's due because I feel like a lot of people who are quote-unquote thought leaders, another term I hate online, they will say things that they know damn well are lifted from someone else, and they act like, I just thought of this because I'm really smart. It's like, ugh, come on, man.
It's a challenge to try to be a thought leader because so many other people are putting out interesting thoughts as well.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to be a thought leader, which is one reason why I don't like that term, because usually thought leaders are people that go, okay, I want to do speaking for a career, so I need to write a book, and I don't really know what I'm going to write my book on. So what I'm going to do is Google I'm going to go have research assistants Google a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to have them go through that, and then I'm going to come up with some sort of system, and I'm going to make an acronym to go with that system, and voila, I have a new diet that I've never tried, that is invented from things that other people pulled out, and now I can speak on nutrition. It's like a business in a box, and you're just really not adding anything to the zeitgeist, in my opinion, when you do that.
Yeah, so I think probably a lot of those people go on to, they get that out of the way, and then they're like, I can do something better, and then they can go and say, okay, now that I've gotten this out of the way, I'm going to do something completely original.
Maybe they've done that. I don't know. I'm not totally convinced that people who start things and say they need to get something out of the way. I don't know, man. I'm not convinced. I think a lot of people, they try to recycle stuff because it's just frankly easier than coming up with something original, which actually takes time.
Yeah. And it takes so much time, and scientists are doing all this original work, but they're not necessarily the ones hyping up or putting it into use. It's Well, I mean, sometimes it is the thought leaders that sort of like read all the scientific literature and then they're like, oh, here's how we can actually use it. So there's some sort of translation that is useful, I think, from the sort of the people who are coming up with brand new knowledge and ideas, and then there's the people who are making it accessible. I feel like those are two different steps.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I read this article a long time ago that was something like, I think it was called the bullshit industrial complex. And it was like, there's people who come up with original work, like scientists who create studies and they write about it. And then there's other people that I would say are like, they call tier 2. And I'm on tier 2, where it's like, we take that science, we read that science, we take that scientist, we ask them questions that make their work more accessible, interesting for other folks, things like that, and create another product out of it. But then there's tier 3 and tier 4, which people say is part of the bullshit industrial complex, where like that person creates a product based on what that interviewer did. And it's like, wait a minute, what? And then there's people below that create a tutorial that shows you how to make a product that's based on this other, right? It's like sort of like this derivative stuff. And there's so many people that do that, and they don't think about the fact that they're not really actually adding any value. They're just creating derivative work so that they can make a name for themselves. And those things are, right. It's a fine point. But the article is called The Bullshit Industrial Complex, and it was by, man, I think you should look for it online and find it and link it in the show notes.
Cool. Jordan, this has been fascinating as always, talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you online?
Sure. I'm at the Jordan Harbinger Show. You know, you're listening to podcasts. That's what I highly recommend you go and find. If you like the interviews, you like the like learning from smart people, you want essentially a mini course on each topic, because like I said, I create those worksheets for people. Well, my team does, to learn and be able to apply what they've learned. So I don't have anything to sell you right now. I'm not even going to try. I don't want to do it. Not interested in that. Just if you like good content, find the Jordan Harbinger Show and dive in.
Brilliant. And I just want to acknowledge you for continuing to improve your craft as an interviewer, getting great guests, and bringing these interviews to people. I'm glad that you're doing it.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks again for coming on. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Jordan. Oh, wow. Another amazing interview with Jordan Harbinger. I learn something every time I talk to him. I know this new show he's got going, the Jordan Harbinger Show. It's going to be awesome. We haven't seen his best work yet. I've listened to several of the episodes. It's really good stuff. So both of us, I'm sure he would love for you to check it out. But I also encourage you to check it out because he is one of the most skilled interviewers, and you're going to be experiencing insight into these guests in a way that probably no other podcast is letting you do. So give his show a listen. And if you learned anything from this interview with Jordan, we'd love to hear about it. You can tweet at us. You can comment on Instagram with what you learned. You can leave something that you got from the show as an iTunes review. There's a lot of ways of getting in touch with us. It's actually very easy to get in touch with me. And even Jordan is very responsive, I've found. And this episode, again, has been brought to you by me over at Adventure Quest Travel. We've got our upcoming trip in Bali in April 20 to 27. Highly encourage you guys to check it out. If you haven't joined me on one of these trips, it's totally going to change your world. It's totally going to rock your boat and make you uncomfortable, which is the whole point of adventure sometimes. So, yeah. Let's have a conversation about that. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.